In the story of Bram Stoker's Dracula, there is no character held up in as much reverence as Mina Harker. None who shine quite so brilliantly, and none who devote themselves so utterly and completely to the cause of destroying Dracula as Mina. None save Jonathan. Yet there is none whom have been more ill-served by the different adaptations or more twisted, deconstructed, and whatnot, as her character has been distorted into the complete opposite of what she was traditionally. And what was she traditionally? Was she a sex-addled kitten who hides Dracula in the basement away from her husband like in Hammer? Was she the imbecilic figure from the 90s, obsessed with a corpse? Was she some sort of reincarnated lover? Or here's one that academics love. She was wed to Dracula when he had her drink his blood. This last claim is ridiculous and makes no sense, and everyone knows it. The only reason these sorts of ideas exist is the notion that vampires represent sensuality. They do to an extent, but rather they are representative of overindulgence in base pleasure, with the idea of the vampiric bite and transformation process being a form of rape. Anyone who says otherwise is trying to sell you something. Let's just be honest. Mina is none of these things. She is treated almost as a stand-in of sorts for the Virgin Mary, or at least this seems the level of reverence that her friends hold her in. She is in truth the female queen of the love archetype, for whom her friends risk all for, and naturally has her lover and husband, who is the greatest of all the heroes assembled before her. It is to her that they pledge allegiance and homage to. She is also the female lover archetype, with Jonathan being the male one. As they come as a pair and are each other's primary motivational factor in the narrative. The story is supposed to be a love story, and is one that sees Mina put front and center after Jonathan Harker's escape from Dracula's enchanted castle. In the Austen-styled middle part, we see that Lucy is a little less mature, more popular, and quite a bit more impulsive than the restrained, genial Mina. Mina is, however, a much more fiercely romantic woman who longs for only one man, Jonathan. Where Lucy might have had her head turned by the prospect of going abroad, Mina thinks little of it, and only of Jonathan's health and the need to be by his side when she receives news he has collapsed and is in an old convent. At this point in the story, we can discern that Mina's motivating factor is Jonathan, and with him calling for her, it shows in turn that who is the only one who could comfort him after the traumas inflicted on him by Dracula? Mina. They are married, and she is entrusted with the care of his old journal from his time when he was imprisoned. This is also a metaphor for him entrusting the whole of his part, his weakness, his very weakest hour, when he was partially unmanned in a sense by Dracula. And how does Mina react? She is touched and disgusted by Dracula, and feels both pity and an even greater sense of devotion to her husband when she finds out the truth. Horrified when she discovers later how impulsively Jonathan threw himself into the hunt and the fight itself against Dracula, She is at once awed by her indomitable husband's strength and courage, even as she is dismayed. Hers is the nature of Andromache, who fears terribly that something terrible may befall her Hector. Should we scorn her for this? Should we scorn Jonathan for his own actions? No. Stoker clearly modeled her after the likes of Andromache or Penelope from the Odyssey, and other more world-savvy and matured women like them, and also endowed her with the cunning and brilliance of an Irene Adler. Stoker was a fan of Doyle's. Mina is not only in this way the lover archetype, but also a woman who feels a strongly protective love for her man and a sense of loyalty to him and their friends. So sweet is she and wise that the man treat and love her as they would an older sister, and come to revere her above even Lucy, whom they all cherished very deeply. Van Helsing all but adopts her, and is adopted by her and Jonathan as a second father of sorts, with Helsing later on in the epilogue telling their son how wondrous the two are. Now this ending apparently is the sort of thing that many academics despise and have sought to twist, saying that Quincy Harker is the son of Dracula. Quite how is something even the most imbecilic mind would wonder about, as it makes no sense whatsoever. How could an animated corpse, Nosferatu, possibly produce sperm and knock up a woman is beyond me. Also, if we think about the dates and the likely themes and how Jonathan and Mina were an active and very eager couple, it would be more likely that if she were pregnant at the end of the story, it would have been Jonathan who knocked her up before Dracula so much as attacked and violated her. The important thing about Mina having a son is that the son, by being bequeathed Quincy's name, is taking into himself the spirit of Morris, not Dracula. What is more is that this is supposed to represent a new beginning. It is thematically the spring after the winter spent in Transylvania, and after the shadow of the vampire has passed. Dracula is the winter, Jonathan the summer, so to speak, and Quincy Harker the spring to an extent. So that Dracula has been defeated and utterly destroyed by Jonathan, so that in place of dead things, new life has sprouted. And this is the legacy of not only the Harkers, but of Quincy Morris. If Mina gave her son that name, it was to honor the man who saved her husband, kept him from being too reckless, and also to honor one of the knights who joined himself to the cause and saved her very soul. Why would she name her son Quincy to honor Dracula? There is something missing to this brand of logic that only an academic could conjure forth. The truth is that if Jonathan can be defined by the virtue of valor, Mina is defined by that of love. She is not only an abiding love for her husband and her surrogate father, Helsing, but also a special bond with each of the men. Arthur Holmwood is only able to weep when in her presence. It is she who takes up the role of sister-in-law of sorts to him, helping and nurturing him after he has lost his father, mother-in-law, and lost his wife, who was also violated and perverted into a monster. Honestly, the level of trauma he has had to endure makes him one of the most pitiable characters in the whole of the story. and it is Mina who attempts to reach out to him, who seeks to provide kindly words and a sense of warmth. As a kind of sisterly figure to him, she not only grounds him, comforts him, but also helps him to have something to commiserate with over the loss of Lucy. Her own innate fondness for him is that of a sister who saw a man who not only gave all that he could to her younger, impetuous sister, but also a fellow sufferer. Someone who loved Lucy and knew her better than anyone else, and so lost almost half of herself when Lucy perished, so that only Jonathan and Arthur could possibly understand what she has had torn from her. Then there is the bond with Seward, whom was the first physician who tried to help Lucy. The love he has for Lucy is one that makes him embarrassed and sheepish. But contrary to some of the depictions where he's an old man, Seward is a young man burning with no less passion than the likes of Quincy and Arthur. Mina and Seward develop an interesting bond, wherein the doctor comes to admire her, not unlike a child with his mother, or a younger brother with his eldest sibling. He also interestingly holds Jonathan in high regard, and looks on him like a hero. Seward, interesting enough, almost feels like the youngest of the group, but also one of the older ones, save for perhaps Van Helsing. As to Quincy, he is ever a knight in shining armor, or a homegrown cowboy from Texas, one who lives and breathes for adventure. His is a spirit that cannot live without adventure, and so he's one of them that does revere Mina, but he looks on her as almost a sister-in-law, like Arthur, as he regards the men of the group as brothers, and is one of the first to swear to help lay her to rest. He does so with utter sorrow in his heart, and honestly, he's a lot like Rick O'Connell from The Mummy, so that Quincy has a very unique bromance of sorts with Mina. She clearly dotes on him, else why would she name her son after him? And is very evidently grateful that all of the warriors in the groups, he does the most to rein in Jonathan's recklessness. Mina is mother, sister, wife, and guardian to this ragtag group of knights, and in the pre-modern sense, she is Lady Fair for them to rescue from the dragon. But this does not mean she is helpless, or does not wish them to slay Dracula. If anything, she is more gung-ho for it than they are, always offering encouragement, pushing them towards destroying Drac, and even memorizing all the routes to Transylvania to make it easier to slay him and attack his home. She acts at a few points like Helsing's deputy, so that she demonstrates her desire for justice by transmitting his orders and taking down his words and scribing them for everyone. All this in mind, how could anyone claim that she is in love with Dracula? They can if they seek to undermine the character and pervert her into something she never was. We must also remember that her reaction towards being informed that she is going to become a vampire is one of horror, and it involves her reacting like a rape victim. To romanticize this is to romanticize the very worst act a man can inflict on a woman, and that's the crux of the problem. Mina overcomes her violation, as does Jonathan, with the end of the story being euphemism for the conquest of such a terrible, heinous crime. This is in complete contrast to how the Hollywood types would have us depict this part of the plot and the themes of the story. What is more is that What is more is that has been noted in the comment section of the Jonathan Harker essay. Mina displays considerable intelligence, rather like Evie from The Mummy. In nature, she is adorable and playful at times, and very intelligent. But make no mistake, she is not there to outshine her husband, but rather to shine alongside him with equal light. And I think this is how Mina, the character, would want it, as she does adore Jonathan. There is much more romance and idealism in the Dracula novel by Bram Stoker than people realize, and many have realized.
And hope you all loved this video. We'll be continuing with our Dracula podcast from now on. And we do hope that you'll be subscribing to the channel. And also, we have a warning to give out. We'll be starting a crowdfund for just $300 for the beginning of June. And it'll be for a fantasy anthology we are helping to edit. So if you love fantasy and even some horror, you'll find it in this anthology, Steelheart anthology. So remember to subscribe, to like, share the video, and let's pump up this channel some more. And I'm going to be getting back to doing regular 5-minute reviews and even starting to hold 5-minute talks with Dan. So until next time, take care.